One session till cocktail time. That's motivation. So there's a big question mark. So this session is basically about a question, and that question is, how do we best advise faculty in the use of automated accessibility testing tools? Which is a very different question than how do we use them. Where I work at OHSU, faculty are often practicing clinicians, and they're also and/or researchers, as well as their teaching practice. So it's hard enough. I was hired at OHSU about a year ago to not only be faculty support for online course content, but faculty support for accessibility. And so right now we're still training them on what is accessibility and how to make your course content accessible. And so it's not only how to make things accessible, which can be really confusing, but then we want them to be able to at least check some of their own work, right, and some of their documents before submitting to us for checking for accessibility. So that's what the name of the session is. I work at the Teaching and Learning Center of Oregon Health and Science University. So today we're going to look at some of the questions surrounding the automated accessibility checkers. We'll look at what those tools are, and then we'll look at how do we advise faculty on them. We'll take a close look at a few particular testing tools, and then just questions and the final thoughts. So OHSU Accessibility, it starts with the Office for Student Access. They do both physical and digital accessibility, policy and procedure, OHSU-wide. They also deal with accommodations, that a student needs a particular accommodation in a course. The Center for Diversity and Inclusion is involved. I also work a lot with DIGS, which is the Digital Identity Guidelines Group, and the Digital Strategy Group. So those are all OHSU-wide. It's an automatic thing. But I work at the Teaching and Learning Center, so we help develop curriculum, we do academic training, online course design and support, and of course faculty development. So the question's basically about automated accessibility checking tools is, what is it telling us? What does it find that we actually do need to pay attention to? What can we ignore? Because oftentimes they pick up something where it's that's not even an issue. So there's a lot of kind of manual conversation going on with these automated tools. What are they missing completely, right? And then what just in generally needs manual review that no automated testing tool is going to pick up on anyway. Somehow I got this on some automated, anyway, sorry. Okay, so here's my lovely campus. Do you know how to stop this from automatics that that are used for checking? Cite Improve? Ally? Blackboard Ally? Any others? Have you ever, and anybody ever used an automated testing tool? So you've used Cite Improve? Have you used Blackboard? Ooh. Did that just advance automatically? Yes. Okay, so my first experience was, WebAIM, which does really good trainings on all things web accessibility. They're in Utah. They have a testing tool called Wave, which is a plugin for, so I put this on Chrome. And so I was like, great, this is gonna really help me pick up on problems with accessibility. And I was in just a normal Sakai site, and this is what I got. And I was like, whoa, that's not really gonna be that helpful for faculty. It came up with 248 errors, 110 alerts, and I thought that's just scary for me, much less faculty, forget it, right? The one thing that I do use this for is that it does show me what's the header, the heading style for that particular heading. So that is helpful. I was a little scared, and I ran to our lead technologist in our department, and I was like, it's coming up with all these ARIA errors, and he was like, oh, don't worry about it. They're just it doesn't matter, right? But then it makes the tool really not all that useful if you're trying to think of what can I ignore and what's it picking up, and And it was just too big of a thing. So definitely not for faculty. So if not Wave, then what? So W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium, which does the WCAG guidelines for accessibility, on their site, they list 123 automated testing tools. So just a quick scroll. Oh. All right, that's not showing either. All right, anyway, end of the day. What's that showing? Did before. Anyway, it's just like they list 123 testing tools, and if you just kind of scroll, they have color contrast checkers and web checkers, but it's a really, really long list. So how do we even know which ones to use, which ones are useful, which ones faculty can use, which ones are really like code oriented, which ones are good for online courses, right? There's a really big difference between that. So we have to think about what we're checking, right? So if you're looking for site-wide or web page, or even kind of the LMS in general, Wave is good, Site Improve. If you're looking at course content within the LMS, different LMSs have different tools. You do it for Canvas, Brightspace for D2L. The general CK editor is within a rich text editor for LMS, usually works really well. And then documents have their own accessibility checking tools. And we're going to be looking at those a little bit later. Microsoft Office, Google Docs, PDFs. And then there's just separate ones for color contrast, which is a pretty big thing in accessibility. So WebAIM has a really good color contrast checker. And then there's a general contrast checker. And I don't know, there are probably about 10 good web color contrast checkers. So one day a faculty member came up, I had been there a couple of months, and she ran up to me and she's like, I heard about Blackboard Allied, let's use it. And I thought, well, great, I'll look into it. It provides accessibility scores. It's specifically for education, and that was really, really helpful to me. So it kind of was getting away from the code and web development into actually course content, online course content, that even check course files. And I was like, this is really, really good. There's instructor feedback, there's really kind of nice color, usability for the kind of like feedback graphs. They suggest steps to improve or fix the accessibility errors. They generate alternative accessible formats for like documents. I was like, this is wonderful. Does not support checking of video or audio files, but they said that feature is coming, right? So checking for transcripts and captions and accuracy. Blackboard, it's compatible with Blackboard, Canvas, and Moodle, but not Sakai. So that's what we use, is Sakai. It's also a paid service, so you also get these budgeting considerations. So I had to kind of keep looking, but it's definitely something that after looking into it, I really, really recommend. If that's something that would be an investment at the school for faculty to use. It looked really, really user-friendly. They've also done a really interesting study. So they took 5 years, they looked at 700,000 courses of North American institutions of higher learning, and they looked at 21 million course content items. In 2012, 27.5% was the average accessibility score, and 5 years later, and this was kind of the era of like accessibility, introducing accessibility, was only 30.6%. So it only went up on the average accessibility score 3 percentage points. So that's not really a huge improvement in accessibility of online content. So Nicholas Mathis of Blackboard, he said, we believe that there's a need for additional tools to help accelerate the rate of improvement. And I think that was just kind of like his comment to introduce Blackboard Allied. I would not say that there's a need for additional tools. There are plenty out there. But I would say that there's a need for tools that are specific for different online areas of content, especially education. So in the UK, uk.gov, they did a test and they called it they tested the world's least accessible web page. So they created a web page of 143 failures, accessibility failures in 19 categories. They tested out free tools, Tenon, Wave, HTML code sniffer, Axe Checker, SortSite, a free trial because that's a paid one. So they tried out mostly free and then SortSite, and they tested for things like layout, contrast, headings, tables, lists, images, multimedia, links, buttons, forms, navigation, basically anything you would find in an online course. And they found that 42 items were missed by all of the tools. And some of those were like big blocks of italics, which they say don't do. They're really, really difficult to read. I think there were some links that they missed, just kind of the way that the links were presented. But these accessibility tools in general picked up 71% of the errors. And they, again, found that what was most effective was use the automated tools along with manual checking, and then have an overall accessibility audit, and then also user testing. And even in user testing, there is a caution. So the W3C says that even assuming that input from one person with a disability is going to apply to finding barriers to access in your site, and that's going to apply to all people with disabilities, is really kind of misinforming what you're looking for. So not any one thing can really represent and look for accessibility issues in your site. So today we're going to look at 4 tools that we use and that are really, really helpful for our faculty. So Sakai, looking at the learning management system checking tool itself, and then 3 documents, Word, PowerPoint, PDF, which are really, really common. So here first is the Sakai, the CK Editor in Sakai. I used to work in Canvas, and it was also kind of their initial, the same thing. And it works only in the CK Editor. So it doesn't check files, it doesn't check anything that's attached other than that, that text edit. So looking at this, can you tell me maybe some of the things that I put in there that are inaccessible? Click here. Someway nothing's. Yep, I tried to make it an unordered list that's not using the proper list style. The picture, no alt text, right? I mean, some of the things you can't tell, right? That's what you need automated tools for. Heading, I don't think I put in a heading structure in there. I just kind of made it bigger and bold. Yeah, there's contrast here. I don't know if you can even see that. I even tried to make the contrast here bad. And then I put some blank cells, which kind of across the board, it's one of those things, don't use blank cells. So I wanted to test that out. I'm sorry? The what? Yeah, exactly. So pretty simple. And what the CK Editor does, it shows you different levels, right? Errors, warnings, notice, and it does have an ignore button. So it's really, really helpful to faculty. Because it'll tell them, it'll say, sometimes it has a button right here instead of quick fix, it can say ignore, right? So the first thing that it came up with, and it has a nice pointer, so it's pointing right here, which was, I don't know, it italicizes it, which is a little bit weird to me, but. So it says paragraphs must not be used for headers. So basically I just made something bigger and bold, and it's telling me that should be a heading style wherever it is in the context. We usually, within that section, it's usually starting at a header 3 or H2 or 3. So you can fix it right then and there. Issue number 2, they don't even color code it, right? It's just a notice. They don't even bother to put like a kind of a yellow warning. It's just white. Empty alternative text only for decorative images. So this one is just a decorative image. It's just a picture of a mountain. So I could just kind of click ignore and move on, or it lets me put in that alt text right there, which is awesome, and then click quick fix. And so it puts it in right for you and takes it off. And then errors 3, 4, and 5, which is really nice. They flag it in like red or pink. So these are actual errors, and one thing that it picked up is I put Angel's Rest and another link right next to each other with nothing in between. And so that picks that up as an error because it's really confusing about what actually are the distinctive links. So you need some kind of text in between. Link text should be useful. So I was really happy to see that it did pick up the click here as an error. And that's really helpful to faculty because I see them do this all the time. And so that's going to be a really helpful thing. And then data tables should have a header. And so that's actually extremely helpful too. In Sakai, it's really easy. You just right click and it kind of has, and it lets you put in the header, check the header row right there. So I found that to be pretty useful. It picked up like some links and the text error. I was really happy about that. It gave a heading style warning. It gave a notice on alt text, and it missed the list style, right? So which I was surprised by. I thought it would pick that up. It missed the both color contrast, and it missed the blank cells, which may or may not be a problem. I think even Microsoft Word downgraded blank cells to like not being a problem. Yeah. This is just rich context editor. I'm not a coder, so I just put one with a parenthesis. Not in Sakai, so not in our LMS, it didn't automatically. So yeah, if you're in Microsoft Word, it's always a problem that it will automatically turn it into a list, and sometimes you're like, I don't want a list, and then you have to deal with the indent, and yeah. So yeah, in Sakai, it just lets you do that, which may or may not be a problem. I even tried it once with like trying to indent and then a dash and then the phrase or whatever, which I see a lot of people do, and it didn't pick that up either. So just doesn't really bother with that. But there are some helpful things here, and I think for faculty and having it right there as soon as they type in or put in their images or their content to have that, I think that's a pretty helpful start. Kind of more like reminders, like, oh yeah, remember this. So moving on to Microsoft Word. First of all, you got to tell faculty where they are. And so depending on if you have Mac or Windows, and depending on what version of Mac, of Word you have, of Microsoft you have, you either go to File, Inspect Document, Check Accessibility, or I think like on my Mac, whatever version I have, you just go to Review, Check Accessibility. So they really kind of like are getting on top of things and making it easier for us. They have really, really good support, rules for accessibility checker, and they actually have really good charts of like what they're looking for and what is an error, what is a warning, and what is a tip. And then I'm not going to go into it, but here is the here are the errors that I created in Microsoft Word. So I did a couple more things. I put in the full HTTPS, a full URL, which I see a ton of faculty doing. I put in that list again. I put in a click here. I did use heading styles, but I skipped them. So here, it did pick up that there's missing alt text, and then you have to decide, you can't make that go away. If you're saying if it's decorative, you can just ignore it. The table it says it's missing alt text. That just makes you think that you could put a caption in, or you could just kind of give it a title like right above it. But it is helpful to let people know, especially if they're using screen reader, to know what that table is going to tell them. No header row is specified. We'll get to that in a minute. Warning. So it picked up both of the full URLs, but it didn't pick up the click here, which I was really a little bit dismayed by. But I actually really like that it picks up full URLs as a warning to help faculty kind of make those clearer. Objects not in line is a weird quirk of Word. And what that is, if you look up near the picture, is this little thing that appears when you insert an image, and it automatically defaults to in line with text, and that's what you want it to be. Otherwise, the screen reader won't even know that there's an image there. So if you want a screen reader, Jesus. Okay. It's something next door going on with. Yeah. Okay, so, but anyway, so that's what that little button is, and that's really, really helpful. And it's just this weird quirk of just Microsoft Word. It's the only place that you have this weird must be in line with text, or else the image just completely disappears if you're using assistive technologies. Okay, and then repeated blank characters, you know how at the end, if you do like an enter or like just kind of like hit the space bar a couple of times, it'll pick that up, not a bad thing. And then tips, it did tell me that I was skipping heading levels. So between favorite hiking trails, which I did as an H1, and Angel's Rest, which I did as an H3, it's letting me know that that's not a logical organization and that Angel's Rest needs to be an H2. And it also picked up between the H3 of Silver Falls, I made South Falls an H5, and it picked that up as well. So I was really happy to see that. So my question was, it was funny, because here it was no header row specified on the table, and here's the table, but Microsoft Word kind of defaults when you click on a table and click design, you can tell here that it automatically, it automatically defaults to checking a header row and a first column. So why in the world is it saying that I don't have a designated header row? Any ideas? It's another quirk, to be honest. You wouldn't know unless you know. So if you right-click on the actual table and go to Table Properties, you have to have this box checked. Repeat as header row at the top of the page. I don't know why it's a quirk when they're really like updating all their accessibility. And if they're automatically designated a header row, why you have to do that, but you have to do that. And even the recommendation is to uncheck allow row to break across pages, but I don't think that'll disturb the accessibility, but that needs to be checked. PowerPoint, pretty similar. All these are similar to Microsoft Word, right? Because it's Microsoft, but there are things particular to PowerPoint. I could have written all the things that are special only for PowerPoint in purple, but I wrote PowerPoint next to it. Why? Some people are colorblind. It's a basic accessibility rule is never use color as an indicator of information, right? So I liked using the color, but I also needed to put PowerPoint or like PowerPoint only or put some kind of text. Wow. Put some kind of text. That's like, half a session to cocktail hour. Okay. One thing that's really particular to PowerPoint is all slides need to have a title. And not only do they need to have a title, but they have to have a unique title. So it will flag if you just have the same title over and over again. If my next slide said PowerPoint Accessibility Checker. Do you guys know what that is, by the way? It's really clever because it's really annoying to type out accessibility all the time. So somebody came up with the fact if you remove the middle 11 letters and write A11Y, it looks like ally. So now you're a disability ally, and it's a lot easier to type. And so that's what that means. Gosh, stop it. Okay. So all slides have titles. Captions for inserted audio and video in PowerPoint will be picked up, if they don't have the captions. And slide titles have to be unique. And this is also really particular to PowerPoint. The suggestion is use the master layouts. Use the slides that already have the layouts, because if you insert text boxes, it could very well mess up the reading order, and it doesn't appear in the outline view, which means if you want to turn it into HTML or create an outline, you're going to be missing any text that is from an inserted text box. So there are just kind of some odd things about that. So I did a test, kind of meta, on this PowerPoint when I was finished with it, and it picked up 33 missing alt text. Mostly that's like the checkers and all the kind of decorative images that I have. Missing slide title on slide 29, just because I wanted to make sure it was picking some of these things up. Unclear hyperlink text, slide 37. I think it was could have been a click here. Oh no, it was a full URL because I was citing a source. So even when it picks that kind of thing up, you have to decide whether or not like a lot of faculty, right? They're like, no, that's the source citation and that's correct. So you don't want to have them change that full URL to a link in context because that's wrong citation. But that's the only time that you would really kind of ignore that kind of thing. Or unless people are, you know that people are going to be printing, right? And they need the URL. Blank rows or columns in, it picked up blank rows or columns in a table. Merged or split cells in a table, and then some tips. Duplicate slide title, and then check reading order, because I put in a lot of my own images, which is my own thing. I didn't, set the amount of images I was going to use and the placeholders. So I did insert a lot of images and I did insert a lot of text boxes. And so it's just going to ask you to check the reading order of that. So here's the table that it picked up on. It picked up on blank rows or columns. So not blank cells. I don't think blank cells are really a problem. So, don't worry about it. Even though a lot of people say they are, they're not. But blank rows or columns could be because a screen reader thinks it's done, right? They think it's finished if you have a whole row. And it also picked up these merge cells and split cells. So where I work, because so many faculty have like theory and clinical and lab and all these kind of different sections, they have the most complicated tables I've ever seen and crazy colors. But really I have to kind of really do like retraining of like split the tables, do a lab table, do a theory table, and not that, because it's too confusing for a screen reader. So that's tables. Okay, and then here's a little bit about the reading order, which is really, really interesting in PowerPoint. And so inserting your own text box won't make it inaccessible. A screen reader, if you put it into a PDF or even reading just the PowerPoint, it'll still read the text. But if you want to turn it into HTML and if you want to have it in outline view, that text in the text box won't appear in the outline view. And so, but what the accessibility part of it is going to pick up on is anything you put onto a slide, the order of that slide is when you put it there, not the order that you want people to read. So sighted people can look at this, and we're going to read checking in on accessibility checkers, guiding faculty, and then presented by. But this is actually the order when you click, so it'll show you here, and it'll click on the slide, and then all you have to do in the home is go to Arrange Selection pane, and it'll bring this up. Now the weird thing is about PowerPoint is that the reading order is from bottom to top. So you want the title, even though a lot of times you put the title on last if you're not using the proper placeholders or you've got text boxes. The good thing is when you click on an item here, it'll show you which item it is on your slide. So you want the title, so you want the first thing to be read here. Unless it's a background image, that obviously has to be at the bottom or else it'll like visually appear covering other things. But you want the reading order bottom to top. So you want the title and then the subtitle and then, and then I have like another kind of a third title, and then, the pictures only kind of matter if you want the alt text to be read by a screen reader. So that's why you have to be very, very wary of inserting text boxes. It's not necessarily an accessibility issue, but it's the reading order. So if I insert text boxes right here, this text box, and I go to outline view, you can see for slide 24, it's not showing any of this at all. Whereas the next slide, this was a placeholder that I put in the text and it's all appearing fine. So at first when I saw this, I panicked because all these facts, and I was like, oh my gosh, like none of the text is read by a screen reader. It's really inaccessible, but it's not that bad. But you do want to check for reading order, and you do want to make sure that if you want to translate it into like an HTML, that's there. PDFs. I'm going to kind of fly through this because PDFs are really hard. It's not really going to be like faculty. First of all, you need Adobe Pro. So some faculty might have it, which is great, but you really, really have to check, not only do like a full check and it's going to do some basic things, but you have to check reading order and you have to check tags. And even I've taken the WebAIM course twice on documents, including PDF, and I'm still a little bit like dizzied by the tags. So this is really helpful. When I click the accessibility checking tool, there are a few things that you want to check. You want to check reading order. You want to make sure the document is tagged. And then you can do your full check. So this is what a reading order pane looks like. So kind of difficult. So this is what, and this is what the checker will bring up, like, oh, you know, it's not even tagged. Okay, that's kind of good to know. Primary language, that's really easy to fix. You can even like click on these and kind of do the fix right there, which is helpful. But then you get into this tags thing and it's really, really difficult. So I'm not even gonna approach this with faculty, right? They're gonna just, their eyes are gonna roll and they're gonna walk away. Here, I thought, well, that's not too bad, right? Here's a scanned PDF, which is #1 advice to faculty is don't do it. But it's pretty useful. You can do like, okay, this is page content order. So there's like a big thing, 1, 2, 3. It picks this up, but you could highlight that and just say that's background artifact and it'll just kind of delete it off of the reading order. And then you've got like 5, 6, and 7. Okay, that's fine. It's missing the slide. If you clicked on this then instead, almost every individual element, it starts to get really, really kind of like crazy and detailed of like what it's picking up as tagged. And so it's not as simple as like, oh, the reading order, like looks good and done. So it's really, really about the tags, and that gets pretty detailed. One thing PDF just introduced, I think fairly recently, is an action wizard, which is really, really nice. So instead of clicking the accessibility, you can click the action wizard. And this is something that I will tell faculty about, because it'll bring up this pane and then it'll say, add your document description, right? That's the title. But you can just click on it. It'll help you do that right then and there, and it'll get rid of that. Recognize text using OCR, so that's a problem with scanned PDFs. Set the reading language. So a lot of these are really easy. When you click on it, fix it right then and there, it'll disappear it off. But then again, it gets into these tags and then running a full check. So advice to faculty always is avoid scanning to PDF. It's just problematic. But definitely, if you do, definitely do a search test. At least make sure that the text is text and not an image. And you can just do a control find and pick a word and see if it's there. And then I kind of direct them to our library. They can really do OCR. They can do scans and really kind of help with automated, I don't know what it is, content recognition or something like that. But it helps turn it from an image to text. Avoid printing to PDF because it won't pick up the tag structure, right? So that's a really easy thing I can tell faculty, because it's something I used to do all the time. I was like, oh, that's just an easy way to make a PDF. If you want to do accessibility corrections, you do need Acrobat Pro, and I would recommend the wizard and then the full check, and then you know, there are some fairly easy fixes they can do, and then they could send it to us for remediation, but at least we're not spending all our time doing these kind of like fairly simple fixes to it. And then there's some like resources for them. So overall, the reliability of testing tools, they miss color contrast pretty much altogether, right? So that's just a manual check. Color is information. That's really important, and that's something that you have to manually check. It'll say there's no alt text, but it won't say badly written alt text. I've seen people put in alt text as like where the file is on their computer, right? Or just, you know, or some like weird name, you know, like they've just kind of copied something, I don't know. But, or something that doesn't really explain, you know, a good alt text could be very, very different for each one of us depending on the context of that information that we want it to convey, right? So faculty could be using, you know, and I work at a health and science university, so they could be using the same image, but really, really trying to discuss different information from that image, so that alt text has to reflect that. Accuracy of auto-generated captions. So even if testing tools, I think they're going to start to really look at, hey, it's not captioned, but it would be really nice if they could really start kind of like testing and giving results on the accuracy of those captions. That would be nice. And then the usability on different mobile device screens. That's a really new thing. All the new WCAG guidelines are almost all the 2.1. They came out like 10 new ones, and I think 7 of them have to do with mobile devices. So that's a really big thing, and that's something that we still have to kind of, like I do something online in a course site in Sakai, and then although somebody just told me in Chrome, you can do a right-click inspect, and then it'll show you can click on Galaxy phone, iPhone, iPad, and it'll show you what it looks like on a device, which is fantastic. So that's very helpful. False positives, alt text for decorative images. So you just have to say, no, that's decorative, ignore it, but it'll always pick up if you don't have alt text, which is fine. Heading styles and structure. It might pick up on some things and you just have to say, I didn't mean that to be a heading, or that's not part of the outline. So basically a quote, I've not found a digital tool that replaces human knowledge and experience when it comes to accessibility. It's like a warning light in your car. It's like there's an issue, but you really need to kind of figure out what's going on and whether it's a big deal or not. My friend's car, there's all these lights. I'm constantly like, is that a problem? Is that a problem? No, no, no. It's like, keep driving. I'm like, okay. So for faculty, the best tool is training. Just keep training. But also now include testing tools, especially on the documents, I think. Like our faculty use a ton of documents. So I think that's kind of important enough to like at least get them started on using those tools in the documents. Manual checking is really important. And then I've developed a course review checklist with kind of like details, and then I'll look at that for them, but I'll also make that available to faculty so that they can use it as a sort of checklist on their own. And then we need to, in the Teaching and Learning Center, we do need to do accessibility audits. You can have all the content being accessible, but if Sakai itself is not accessible, then what's the point? So you really do need to do those overall audits and, of course, user testing. Any questions? Yeah. So with the DIGS, the accessibility group, they just did one, and so we met, and they're OHSU wide, so they have to go to, I can't remember what but so like they have to kind of report to anybody who uses that content and start there. I'm very faculty and online course design, and to be honest, that's my next thing. I'm developing the like policy and procedure for online course content, and that is really one of the biggest questions is like, well, what is the, so it's like I can do the checklist and I can report back to them, and then what? And I did kind of like ask around, and kind of the response was, well, like it's sort of their responsibility. Our responsibility is like provide the training. We can support and fix and remediate, a PDF if they really need it. But really, once we send that checklist back and say here are inaccessible features, it really is up to them. And I don't know if there's going to be like a university-wide kind of, I am kind of keeping track right now of courses that I've checked and what the major issues were. And so I think, kind of looking, we just started this, we're really behind. So they hired me almost exactly a year ago, April 25th. I started, so, but a lot of other schools are already like into their training and had all this kind of stuff on their websites. And so I think we're a little bit behind. So one of the things that's good about that is I can kind of see how other people approach that, but I haven't really necessarily gotten there yet.
Do you have an orientation for faculty that they're all required to go through at this point?
It's been discussed, and I would love it. Because right now we offer Train Your Brain. It's our whole department, the Teaching and Learning Center, offers Train Your Brain workshops. And it could be anything from like active learning, and it's not just for online content, but it's just for teaching in general. And we have a menu and they can request it and stuff like that. And so only 3 groups so far. I've only done accessibility training for 3 groups, but I'm like, this is like an issue that needs to be addressed. And so I'm working with the Office for Student Access because they're doing the overall OHSU policy and procedure, and they're trying to we're kind of working together to get the investment at the high administrative level of the university to start kind of requiring trainings, or else yeah, it's just too scattered and too hit and miss. But there are, like, I've seen like workshops, you know, at conferences, like how to get administrative, you know, how to get that buy-in and how to get that investment so that we can kind of at this level really get that training in and get that support. So, yeah. Right, exactly. And I have heard people, yeah, they really step it up. But why wait? And at my school, one thing that's really good, and I think we kind of jumped in a little bit later, but one of the things that's really, really been a great buy-in for faculty is we're approaching it from the universal design for learning approach, and then I kind of get to be like, okay, there's this legal specifics that we have to do, but they really, especially for faculty, they really like that approach because it's best practice, right? It's best practices for learning and diversity and inclusion, and not, you know, and so it's not just kind of like legal and sort of technical, and, you know, I don't have people with disability anyway in my class, right? Because we're mostly like graduate students and medical, so, you know, it's not like PCC, which has this like incredibly like diverse, you know, student body, like, you know, and so a lot of the pushback at first was, why don't I have any, you know, why do I have to do all this, right? So universal design really, really helps that overall thing, and then I kind of just, you know, sneak in this. But we're developing like all the resources and the workshops, and just kind of getting that word out is where we are right now. Thank you.
All right, and hey, before everyone